Hi, friends. I'm Scott Giles, a consulting hypnotist and a life coach, what we sometimes call a certified hypno coach. And welcome to Saturday at 2:30, which is the video podcast that I do every Saturday at 2:30 Central Time. I always touch upon some theme of coaching or the hypnotic arts and sciences. Today, I want to talk about self-compassion versus self-criticism. Now, self-criticism, the incessant need to critique yourself against a standard of perfectionism, turns out to be a transdiagnostic factor in many forms of psychopathology. Whereas self-compassion, the ability to relate to yourself with some forgiveness and some empathy, is associated with exactly the opposite. Now, self-criticism is predictive of many forms of cognitive collapse. Wonderful article called Self-Compassion and Self-Criticism. If you're curious about it, please feel free to email me and I'll send you a PDF. But it's by three noted authorities. Rick Warren, PhD, Clinical Associate Professor, Department of Psychiatry, University of Michigan Medical School. Ilk Smits, PhD, Faculty of Psychology and Neuroscience, Manchester University in the Netherlands, and Kristen Neff, Associate Professor, Department of Educational Psychology, University of Texas at Austin. An impressive article. According to the research cited in that article, and according to the National Institutes of Mental Health, having a tendency to criticize yourself is predictive of poor outcome with almost any form of therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't work as well. Interpersonal psychotherapy doesn't work as well if you're self-critical. Pharmacological interventions with follow-up, antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication does not work as well. And even did worse than even just a placebo doing nothing. If you are self-critical, you bring down your chances of having a successful life. It's not that you're trying to hold yourself to a standard or trying to improve yourself. You're actively sabotaging yourself with a constant diet of self-critique. According to research, self-criticism plays a role in depression, anxiety, eating disorders, troubled interpersonal relationships, whereas self-compassion does exactly the opposite. People who are self-compassionate are less depressed, less anxious, their relationships are better, they tend not to have a difficult relationship to food. Now, what are the causes of self-criticism or that lifestyle which predisposes to so many problems? The article was interesting. Elsewhere on my YouTube channel, you can find a video I made about your ACE score, your adverse childhood experiences. Increasingly, the evidence is mounting that certain experiences in childhood predispose to serious problems, including inflammatory medical disorders, later in life. And that study was done by the National Institutes of Health, so I do urge you to take a look at it. According to the study that cited by these authors, the causes of self-criticism as a lifestyle are cold, over-controlling, and restrictive parents. Sigmund Freud, who a lot of people consider to have been discredited by modern research, maintained that an awful lot of lifestyle problems were in fact rooted in childhood trauma. And the latest research is kind of showing that Dr. Freud may have been more right than we think. On a parallel, positive early experiences with your caregivers predisposes to self-compassion. So if your parents were emotionally distant, cold, controlling, restrictive of what you wanted to do, they wanted to control what you did, what you said, what you read, the movies you could see, the churches you could go to, that creates in you the liability of a self-critical mindset, which causes all these problems downstream. People who have a high degree of self-criticism, according to research, tend to achieve goals not because they want to achieve those goals for their personal enrichment, but because they seek to avoid criticism and rebuke. And so as a result, they live their lives with in a state of, dissatisfaction, a lack of fulfillment, and fear. Almost everything they do turns out on analysis to be motivated by fear instead of by love, enjoyment, and fulfillment. People who are self-compassionate are more likely to succeed. They are more likely to bounce back from a mistake or a failure. So self-compassion is not a weakness. It's not letting yourself off too lightly, as I sometimes hear from my clientele. Self-criticism is the weakness. Self-compassion is an active and powerful adaptive strategy to living in a stress-filled world. So how do you get there? Well, I come from an environment, an early childhood experience where I was counseled to be self-critical. Indeed, nothing I ever did would be good enough to achieve any degree of praise or any unqualified supportive comment. The researchers have said that there are three things that turn out to be important in making the journey from self-criticism to self-compassion. First, self-kindness. You understand that it is completely inhumane and completely unreasonable to hold yourself to a standard of perfection. Human beings are not ever going to be perfect because the human nervous system learns by trying things and discovering what works and what doesn't. As a result, we learn by trial and error, and mistakes are absolutely inevitable. If you never make a mistake, you would never have learned anything, and you would be a blob sitting in a hospital bed. So holding yourself to a standard of some kindness, well, I tried that, it didn't work, so I'm going to try something else. That's the way to go. Second, humanity. Understanding that every single human being alive screws up sometimes. We're judged not by whether or not we screw up, but we are judged by what we do about that. Do we correct? Do we apologize or make amends if that's possible? That's what humans should do. And that basic humanism in self-treatment is the second characteristic behind self-kindness. And third, mindfulness. Now, by this, the authors don't mean the meditative practice of being in the moment. What they mean is don't exaggerate the importance of issues, mistakes, or problems. Yeah, they may be important in the moment, but 5 years from now, you're probably not even going to remember them. What's going to matter is what you do about those problems and the velocity that gives you going forward into the future. So don't think that the fact that you blew the talk, or you didn't get the job, or you said the wrong thing in a relationship. Don't exaggerate the importance of that. Now, yeah, be humane, apologize, make amends if you can, but ultimately, little of these things actually matter. So those are the three tools. First, self-kindness. Second, a recognition of your humanity. And third, mindfulness, a refusal to exaggerate the importance of mistakes or failures. Now, I've often mentioned that I come from a family that I consider a train wreck. Fortunately, I exited that family in a variety of levels fairly early. What I did was I got involved with a community of people that helped me correct the damage that had been done to me in growing up. And someday perhaps I'll be comfortable talking about that community, but one of the rules of belonging was that you don't talk about it, so I still feel myself bound by that obligation. But there was a rule. We were a mutual admiration society. We only talked about each other positively. If you didn't agree with what someone was doing, you might respectfully articulate that, but if there was pushback, you stopped. We don't argue with each other. We don't criticize each other. And if you tried to do that, the leadership in the community would call you to correction. And if you continued not to show admiration for another member of the community, you would be removed. We practice a ceremony that goes back to the beginnings of the Nordic peoples, of which my own ancestral bloodline runs to. The ceremony was called boasting. And yes, it's exactly where we get that word from. What would happen is the community would gather, often around some sort of a fire or hearth, and a drinking horn full of mead, fermented honey, would be passed. I have one. This is such a drinking horn, carved with the world serpent, and around the rim in the silver is are embossed the runes of the Elder Futhark, an alphabet that was used by my ancestors. It was really just an alphabet. These days, some folks in the New Age or metaphysical community use it for divination, but there's no evidence whatsoever that the Elder Futhark was ever used for that purpose. It was just a decoration or a practical alphabet. It's sealed with beeswax so it can hold an alcoholic beverage, and this would be circulated. It would come to you, you'd take a haul of it, it would constantly be refilled, and what you would do is you would boast. You would say good things about yourself, and everyone had to say, yes, and then you'd pass it on to the next person who would boast about him or herself. After this made a few rounds, the boast got somewhat exaggerated to the point where everyone knew you were making a joke. But still, it was fun to do. It was fulfilling. It's fun to brag about yourself, even if everyone knows you're kind of pulling their leg. And that ceremony, boasting, became one of the things for me that began to overwrite the harm that I suffered in my family of origin. So I recommend a practice similar to that. I don't think you need to go find a Nordic drinking horn, but give yourself the benefit of the doubt as you live your life and talk about yourself in a positive way and talk yourself up to some other people. It's okay to boast because your subconscious mind is listening when you do that. And if you run yourself down, it's still listening. And it's going to take that seriously, because it doesn't know the difference between what it hears and reality. So talk to your subconscious mind in that way, in a way that is enhancing, and you will move from self-criticism to self-compassion. Hey, thank you for your attention today, as always. If I could be of help to you, please feel free to reach out and contact me through my website or my Patreon channel if you want a deeper experience of my work. And when I edit this, I'll put the various URLs up that will appear as titles. If you're watching this on YouTube, please feel free to subscribe and share. And if you're on Facebook, please like and share. Thank you very much. Do well and boast about yourself. You deserve it. Bye-bye now.